Hello and welcome to this video where the subject, as you see, is perspective panning in Pictures to Exe, but for best results we need the help of Photoshop. All we need from Photoshop is to be able to reduce the resolution of the image, reduce the entire size, to be able to make a very quick and simple selection, copy that selection to a new layer and save both of those layers independently. Then we can go into Pictures to Exe and create the effect. Now I hope you've already watched the demo that I made because it sets the scene for what we're about to do. And you may recall this was one of the images that worked particularly well. It works well because of the foreground detail and also the detail in the sky. What I'm going to do first is to take a bit of pressure off my computer because I need to create a PNG file in a moment. So I'm going to begin by going up to my image menu at the top of the screen, going to image size. There's the full size of the image that I originally created. I'm going to knock the pixel value down on the width to about 3000 pixels, click OK, and then I'll hit Ctrl+0 to fit that image back onto my screen. The demo explained why we need to just reduce the size of the image a bit, but we've still got plenty of pixels to do what we require, because when you think about it, we're about to make a slideshow which is likely to be 1920 pixels by 1080, and we've got 3000 pixels on the long side to play with, so we should be fine. Now let's start by going over to the toolbox on the left hand side because we need to pick a selection tool. I'm going to suggest probably one of these two, either the lasso tool, which I often call the freehand lasso tool, or the polygonal lasso tool. Doesn't really matter, whatever one you're comfortable with. Because what I want to do is to make a selection of a part of the sky, and I'm going to separate that from the base of the image. With this image here, I started in this dark area of cloud, and I think I come along this area here. You can see that the selection I'm making doesn't take any time at all, around the outside and down and join up. I'm going to give that edge a little bit of softness, and I can do that with Select and Mask. Choosing Select and Mask, coming over to the right hand side, I'm going to view my image black and white because that's going to give me a good way of just adjusting the feather of that edge. So what do I want? Something like that. You can see we're somewhere, let's get it up to about 20 pixels, and we'll click OK to output to the selection we've already got in place. Now all we need to do is to copy that selection to a new layer. Ctrl+J will do that. That's about it. Now all we've got to do is save those two parts. The first thing we need to do is to save the entire image as we can see it here as a JPEG. There's no need to rename these images, but I'll do that here for demo purposes. So I'm going to go to File, Save As. I've created a folder on my desktop. This is the one, Perspective Panning. I'll open that. So I'm going to call this Seascape, and I'll call this Bottom, and I'm going to select JPEG as the save type, saving that at a level of 6, which meets all of my needs, and OK. Now I can go to the layers on the right hand side, just turn off the background layer. That's the part now we need to save as a PNG file, and that will retain the transparent nature of the bottom section. So I need to go back up to my File, Save As, navigate to where I'm working, Desktop, Perspective Panning. I'm going to change the file save type to PNG, and I'll give this a similar name, Seascape, but this one I'll call Seascape Top so we can identify easily in Pictures to Exe. When I click Save, I'm going to choose medium file size, medium saving, and click OK. You'll notice that you've got two other options here. One gives a large file size, very fast saving. One gives us a very small file size, slowest saving. Let's select the medium and click OK. You'll notice that an option comes up on the tab of the image, and it tells us how the file is saving. And compared to a JPEG or a Photoshop file, you may find this just a little bit on the slow side, so be patient. Now, as you can see here, I've opened up Pictures to Exe 9. I've located the two images I've just saved from a folder on my desktop. I'm going to begin down in the slide list down the bottom. I'm going to hit Alt S to produce a blank. In fact, I'm going to do that 3 times in all. We're going to start with a blank, end with a blank, and we're going to build the perspective panning on the center blank. So I think I'll give it about 15 seconds of slide duration, so we've got time to see what we're about to produce. Now we need to open that center blank in the Objects and Animation screen. Coming over to the bottom right, what I want to do down here is right click, and I want to add a frame, because I'm going to put the two parts of our image inside this frame. So once the frame's been made, I can right click the frame once again. Now I can choose to add an image. I need to go to my desktop and the folder I'm working in, and I'm going to select the seascape bottom to start with, but then straight back to my frame bottom right, select it again, right click, add an image. This time I'm going to add the seascape top, which is our PNG file. So we're up and running. So to make a start with my seascape top image selected down at the bottom right, I'm going to go to my rotate X here, click on the X, and I can scroll left or right. Well, the shape that I want is this one here, so I need to bring it forward. Now I'm going to select somewhere around -50. So that means that if I go down now and select seascape bottom, to give the opposite effect, then this value needs to be 50. So rather than click and drag, I could just overtype the value. And there already we can see the basis of the perspective panning 3D effect. Now, by making those changes, it's quite clear that the images are not covering the basic slideshow size, which that black area represents, which is 1920,080. So I'm going to select the frame, because now I can zoom the frame, which will take both the seascape top and the seascape bottom with the zoom. So I just need to click and drag a little bit to maybe bring it up to about that position. We should have plenty of pixels to actually use here with the 3000 pixels on the long side of the images that I created. The next job is to add more rotation to the frame down at the bottom right. So I'm going to go over to the left, at the bottom left of the timeline, to my keyframe there, and then all the way back again to go to rotate Y. So what I need to do here is either put the value in or click and drag. So the sort of effect I'm going to create is something like this. I want to go around about 20 is the setting that I'm looking for, but these settings are all variable, of course. What I need next is the keyframe at this end of the timeline, one to end that rotation on the Y-axis. So I'm going to hit the insert key to create that, go back and tick the box to bring my rotation into play. Now if I give 20 at the left hand end, then here all I need to do is put -20, and we have the basis of our perspective panning. And if I bring my cursor into the center and just move it backwards and forwards, you can see the sort of effect we have. But you couldn't have failed to spot another little problem there, that we're drifting off to the left here, leaving a gap on the back or the base of the picture, which we would see in our slideshow. So I think we've probably got a couple of things to do. First of all, I think we need to select the frame, and with the keyframe selected on the left hand side, we're just going to bring up the zoom a little bit, and don't double click it as I just did. Something like that, just bring it up to that sort of size. These again, as I keep saying, are all variable. But what I think I'll also do is slide it a little bit to the right. So I'm going to use my pan here just to take that little V just to the edge of the image. So I've got a pan of 17 there. So I need to go down to the keyframe here, and I need a pan of -17. And now if I put my cursor at the left and press play, there we can see the perspective panning, and it looks pretty good. I think the 15 seconds looks just about right. Now you may find that sometimes the horizon needs a little bit of straightening, so I'm going to select my first keyframe because you can see it's dipping down just a little bit. So if I go to my rotate C, I'm just going to use my up arrow to just straighten that up a little bit. I think 2 is a little bit too much, so maybe I'll just click and drag that back a little bit. I just want it to be somewhere in the middle. Let's see if I can put 1.5 in there. That looks better. Then if I come up to this end, then really I'm probably going to need to put -1.5. So let's try that. And that looks a bit straighter. I think what I may do here, if I close the objects and animation screen and I just drop into my timeline for a moment, let me just adjust this a little bit so we don't have to sit waiting. But what I thought it may be a good idea to do is to try a full screen preview. Not a good thing to do when you're trying to record on-screen videos. They don't always do justice to Pictures to Exe, but let's give it a try anyway. Coming back into Pictures to Exe, it is possible to create perspective panning using a slide style. In place of the PNG file, which I cut off the top of this image, we have to create a mask. Now the problem with that is, although it works fine, it is a little bit hit and miss, because when we create a mask we have to predetermine where the line is where the mask fades from black to white, whereas when we go into Photoshop and use a selection, we can choose the path that we want to cut off a little bit more carefully, and that does seem to work better. Now because I did make a slide style to see just how it may work, what I've tended to do is to use the slide style on images to test the water, to see what sort of effect I get, and if it looks promising, then I'll take the picture into Photoshop and I'll remove the sky a bit more carefully. So here we have perspective panning. A very nice touch. It looks good visually. I think it's one of those techniques we could overdo, so I think it needs to be used sparingly. If you're watching my video on YouTube and you've enjoyed it, then can I encourage you to try one or two of the others. If you're a photographer who has more images stored on your computer than you know what to do with, then you need to take a look at one of our audio-visual presentations. If you can find a better way to present your images than audio-visual, then I'd like to see what you find, because in over 40 years I've never found better than this. So if you are watching on YouTube, check out the links below, because I'm going to include a link for the software itself, including a trial download. Audiovisual is a great way to show off your photography, particularly with perspective panning. And I've got both Pictures to Exie slideshow software and plenty of videos to get you started.